So here it is, the toughest stretch of ACC play. Are the Tar Heels ready for it?
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast. It's the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making us your first listen or watch. And I want to give a special shout out to the everydayers, the Locked On Tar Heels insiders, and of course our great Discord members. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers, you can bet $5, and if you win, you get $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head on over to FanDuel.com to get it going. Before we get into today, I need to tell you about something special going on today. I hope you're listening to this earlier in the day, and I hope that you have a Whataburger near you, because I love Whataburger and I love their honey butter chicken biscuit, and it is literally free today from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. You're welcome. Go grab one right now. I've already had mine as you're probably listening to this. Some great news before I talk about what's on today's show. Caleb Wilson, brand new Carolina recruit, named a McDonald's All-American on Monday. Let's go. Congrats, Caleb. Also, the football schedule is out in its entirety, all 12 games. We're going to look at that a little bit. I'm anticipating doing that maybe on Thursday's show. Maybe we'll do a little special side show with Denoris, or we'll see what we're going to do with that. But before we get into today's show, it is time for Trivia Tuesday. Here we go. Elliot Cadeau recently had a career-high 13 assists. Crazy stuff from him. But it did not make it into like the top 6 of Carolina's single-game records. So that's today's question. The top 4 single-game assist totals are by 4 different Tar Heels. Who are they? Bonus points if you can name how many in the game and all that stuff. I just want you to name the 4 players who hold the 4 single highest assist game totals. All right, answer on that coming up at the end of the show today. So here's where we're going. Pittsburgh tonight, last 9 o'clock game of the season, regular season anyway, thank goodness. We're going to get you ready for that. 4 Corners preview. But I want to set up, before we get into all of that, the stretch that the Tar Heels are entering into right now. I've teased it multiple times. We've looked at it, talked a little bit about it, but here it comes. Here it is. North Carolina, it's not the hardest stretch maybe necessarily of their entire schedule, because the non-con certainly provided that. But this is definitely the most difficult stretch of the ACC portion of the schedule, made all the more so because of what the Tar Heels did not do in non-con, and because of the stumbles that they've had recently in ACC play, namely Stanford and Wake Forest. But here we go. Carolina tonight is at Pitt. Saturday is the first Duke game at Duke. Then Carolina gets a break, a week off, which is a nice little reprieve, before hosting Pitt the next Saturday. That's February 8th. But then a quick turnaround to their first time being on Big Monday, where they will host hosting Pitt Sunday, and then going to Clemson Monday. Man, that is rough. And then honestly, the next game after that's another away game. You got to go up to Syracuse. The Orange aren't great, but still, 4 road games in 5 games is tough sledding. But I just want to focus on those first 4. At Pitt, at Duke, versus Pitt, at Clemson. Oh, goodness. This is a crazy, crazy stretch. Quad 1 at Pitt, Quad 1 at Duke. At least as of right now, Quad 2 hosting Pitt. They're just outside that Quad 1 territory. They were 34th on Monday, and you got to be top 30 at home. And then at Clemson, which is also a Quad 1. So, look, here's the deal. Even though it's the toughest stretch, it is the biggest opportunity stretch of the ACC schedule for Carolina, because with the ACC being a little bit down, there just aren't a ton of Quad 1 games, but you get 3 here in a 4-game stretch, and you got to go take advantage of it. You just absolutely have to. And man, another part of this is that as we get into this Pitt game, we got to recognize that, yes, it is Duke week. I get that, and I hear that. and I see it, right? But also, you've got to make sure to make this not be a trap game. You cannot look ahead to Saturday. Not only just because Carolina's not as strong as they have been in recent years, or last year, I guess I should say, but just because it's like you can never look ahead. I think Duke did that a little bit on Monday night hosting NC State. I mean, the Blue Devil had UNC warm-up on its little the athletic tape thing that it wears on its forehead. I mean, that alone tells me everything I need to know about how they felt about the Wolfpack, and they almost paid the price for it. And let's remember the situation Carolina was in last year. The Tar Heels went 17-3 in ACC play. 2 of those 3 losses bookended the first Duke game when Carolina beat Duke at home. Carolina lost at Georgia Tech. Remember the no call when RJ got fouled at the end of the game? And then they lost at home to Clemson right after Duke. That was a game, if I remember correctly, without Seth Trimble. And I, again, still think Carolina wins that game with him. So in this 4-game stretch that we're talking about, at Pitt, at Duke versus Pitt, at Clemson, what needs to happen? Well, right now, Carolina is 13-8, 6-3 coming into this stretch. There are 5 outcomes that are possible: 0-4, 1-3, 2-2, 3-1, 4-0. That's the possibility. I know you're like, well, duh, Isaac, that's how numbers work. Yeah, I get it. But each one of these things leaves Carolina in a very different spot. And it would have been, had Carolina, even if they lost to Wake, if they had just taken care of business of Stanford at home, they'd be in a different situation here in these 4 games. You might feel better about going just 2-2. You can maybe even weather 1-3, but now you just simply cannot. 0-4, I think you're done. You're out. At that point, you would be 6-7 in ACC play and 13-12 overall. And I just, with the weakness of the ACC and Carolina's losses mounting like that, I just don't see a world in which they come back from it. If you go 2-2, maybe that's still a world in which you're okay. You'd be 8-5 in ACC play at that point. You'd be 15-10 overall. You'd have to win probably every other game the rest of the way. Maybe you could lose to Duke in the regular season finale, but that's it. You just don't want to mess around with that. So I truly, honestly, I hate to say it, but I think Carolina has to go 3-1 in this stretch to feel comfortable with their standing. You might be able to weather it going 2-2, but I just don't want to risk that. You gotta go 3-1 in this stretch, and it's gotta start tonight at Pitt. Now, part of the calculus is who you beat and who you lose to, right? Obviously, a win at Cameron is worth infinitely more than any of the other 3 games. So if you win at Duke and another one of these games, then you might be able to go 2-2 and feel a little bit better. But so that's part of the calculus too, not just how many wins and losses, but who they're against. So keep that in mind as we go through this stretch. I mean, ideally, let's go 4-0, right? Let's get crazy. And why not, given the way this schedule has gone? But here's the other thing I want to say about this crazy difficult stretch that Carolina is about to enter. Do you know what it's going to take to achieve the things you want to achieve? Because I think we feel like, man, things have fallen apart and they're not good, and Carolina is a bad team. Let me be Hubert Davis for a minute. Carolina, in order to achieve what they want to in this 4-game stretch and beyond, it's all about the discipline and the details. And I know we're tired of hearing that, but let me explain why I said that. Why so? I want to invite you inside the crazy brain of Isaac Schade for a second. It's wild in here, but come live with me. As I started taking my notes for this Pitt game, I started laughing to myself, and I thought, I could probably tell people on the show today, if we just tuned in for the final 3 minutes of every game, as close as they all are, we probably wouldn't miss much. And that final 3 minutes is all we really need to watch. Obviously, I'm joking. We're going to watch the whole game, and we want to see that. But I was like, legitimately, though, let me go look at the where each game is at the 3-minute mark. So I went in and looked at it. Just the ACC games. Carolina has played 9 ACC games. And truly, if you go look at the scoring margin at the 3-minute mark, man, Carolina does not have to be sitting at 6-3 in ACC play. Let's go from most recent and work our way backwards. Boston College. Again, all of these are the 3-minute mark of the second half. Boston College, 3 minutes to go. Carolina's down 1, 81-82. Wake Forest down 2, 56-58. Stanford up 3, 66-63. Cal, one of 2 outliers. Carolina was up 23 at that point. NC State, Carolina's up 1, 58-57. SMU, the other outlier, Carolina's up 16 points, 76-60. Notre Dame down 1, 66-67. Louisville down 1, 69-70. Georgia Tech up 2, 59-57. I say all that to say this. In Carolina's 9 ACC games, at the 3 minutes mark left to go in regulation, there's the 2 outliers where Carolina has been winning by 16 or more. Let's chalk those up for the Tar Heels. But in the other 7, each of those 7 ACC games has been within 1 possession at the 3-minute mark. So that's give or take 3 points, either plus or minus. And unfortunately, you'd love to see Carolina go 5-2 or 6-1 in those games, but they're 4-3. And when the margins are that close, that's what's going to happen, right? You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. I'm glad they're above 500. They could equally and easily be 3-4 or 2-5, right? That's what we could be staring at. So we'll take that. But that's like the feelings we have right now. It's that far away from being 9-0. Or 8-1 or 7-2 in ACC play. If Carolina would just simply take care of, as Coach Davis says, the discipline and the details. You're right there on the doorstep, man. You just got to walk through it. So, yes, this Carolina team is flawed. Yes, there's a lot to get figured out. Yes, they got to get stuff going defensively. Yes, the offense has welled up at times and is really stagnated. But you're just right there on the doorstep of winning almost like all of these basketball games. There is not a single game in 0 of the 9 ACC games has Carolina been in any sort of uncompetitive hole down the stretch, right? At the 3-minute mark of every game, they've been right in it and had the chance to win them all. And unfortunately, they've lost 3 of them, and now that's why they're in the situation they're in. And the margins this season are that razor thin. So I hope that, A, you're encouraged by that, hearing how close Carolina is to having an ACC record that we feel better about. But also, for me, there's 2 things. You either have to figure out how to navigate these close games better and win them more capably, or just avoid them altogether and play better earlier in the game. There is no reason Carolina should be in that sort of situation against BC, against Notre Dame or Georgia Tech or NC State. Those teams are not good enough. Carolina has to figure out how to assert themselves as they did against SMU, as they did against Cal. That's got to show up and be there, and it hasn't been. But again, so close. Do you see how close it is? And as Carolina enters into this 4-game stretch that we're talking about as the toughest, let's bring it back to that. The opportunity is in front of them. And they got to snatch it. And as Coach Davis always says, to me, it's all about the discipline and details to make it happen. No possessions off. Every shot matters. Every time you touch the ball matters. Every time you guard somebody matters. Communication matters at every moment. It's all got to happen. All right. So, look, we got to get to our 4 corners preview. Jae'lyn Washington, is he going to be ready to go? We'll talk about that and more in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, Pat Mahomes, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrills from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is really easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, man, that's the icing on the cake. Looking ahead to this game tonight, Pitt is favored by 3.5 over the Tar Heels. If you believe Carolina can go in and get this thing, a straight up win, that's all you need to settle that bet. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Remember, $5 bet for the first timers. If it wins, you get 200 in bonus bets. It's all happening at FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. 4 corners preview. Here we go. North Carolina at Pitt. We'll talk more about that game in segment 3. But I always like to get to the Four Corners preview first. Number one, Jay Wash. Is this dude truly ready to go? He said he felt good after the game. The doc said structurally everything looks good. But man, once that adrenaline wears off, you just never know. So we'll see. Does he suit up? Does he start? Is he limited? Can he play a full complement? Is he any lingering mobility effects? Keep your eye on that. It's a late tip tonight, so plenty of time to get his knee and his body up and going. We will see. And it's tough because Jay Wash is coming off of one of his best all-around performances of his entire Tar Heel career, if we're being honest. And so you really would love to have him in this game, particularly, and we'll talk about this here literally in our next Four Corners preview point, but Pitt is sizably big, and so Carolina could really use him. But just in case, the rest of the front court guys got to be ready to go. Van Allen Lubin, Ty Claude, James Brown, right? Like these guys are going to be probably needed because even if Jay Wash is ready to go, maybe he's limited at least somewhat. Four Corners preview point number 2. I just teased it, but size is going to be a problem. Even more so Saturday at Duke, but it starts tonight at Pitt. Let me just give you the starting lineup for the Panthers. 6'3", 6'3", 6'7", 6'10", 7 foot. Again, that's 6'3", 6'3", 6'7", 6'10", 7 foot. And if you know anything about these Tar Heels, they ain't matching up with that very well. And some of this is going to depend on Carolina's starting lineup, but if Coach Davis goes with the same starters as Saturday, Tar Heels were 6 foot, 6'1", 6'3", 6'4", 6'8". So that would be 6 foot on 6'3", 6'1" on 6'3", 6'3" on 6'7", 6'4" on 6'10". Literally, Ian giving up a half a foot, and then 6'8" on 7 foot. Even if he goes back to what it had been lately, meaning RJ Davis, Elliot, Cadeau, Drake Powell, Ian Jackson, and Jalen Washington, that would be 6 foot on 6'3", 6'1" on 6'3", 6'4" on 6'7", 6'6" on 6'10", and 6'10" on 7 foot. So that gives you, at least makes up some of the margins a little bit. But even Pitt's backup, they have like 8 guys that play average double-digit minutes. Those 3 backups, 6'3", 6'5", 6'8". So the smallest guy in their rotation is 6'3". Carolina's going to have to figure out how to deal with that. And that's the point, though. It's not about, well, crap, we're screwed. We're shorter, so we're just going to acquiesce and congrats, Coach Capel, you win. No. What you got to figure out is how to counter it. And Carolina can do so because they're wildly athletic. They've got great activity. They can cause a frenzy, but they got to go do it, man. Got to be able to go do it. And I would, yet again, I'm going to continue doing it, advocate for some zone on defense. I think it could really help. I'd love to see Carolina try it. Number 3 in our Four Corners preview. Pitt is coming off a win at Clemson over the weekend, at Syracuse. A very big difference there in those two teams. Coming off a win at Syracuse this weekend, but prior to that, they had a 4-game winning streak. Good grief, a 4-game losing streak. Let's try that all again, shall we? Rewind. Although Pitt just won at Syracuse over the weekend, they are coming off a 4-game losing streak prior to that. Yes, nailed it that time. And interestingly, the third of those 4 losses was the game down at Florida State. After the game, these two teams kind of got into a scuffle. And to be fair, it was because Florida State did that thing where they like dunked right at the end of the game. Pointless game. They're up 10 already, and they dunk at the buzzer. You just don't do that, man. You don't show up your opponents that way. That's poor sportsmanship. That said, Pitt handled that adversity miserably. And who was right smack dab in the middle of it but Jeff Capel himself, having to be restrained, literally yelling at players. And to that I say, how do we get under their skin that way yet again? Because I don't know if you remember the past couple years playing Pitt, but it's been very easy to get under the skin of both Capel brothers, the Duke version Jeff, and unfortunately, our own Tar Heel brother, Jason Capel, has been like in histrionics about Carolina. And I don't know, like somebody did something to this poor guy. And remember there was the whole thing with the game day graphic and he thought he was being trolled. I mean, it's like, bro, it ain't about you. Chill out. But I say all that to say, again, the players were ticked. Capel's up in the middle of it. And Capel is being part of the problem rather than part of the solution in that moment where we're trying to stop kids from fighting, basically. What are you doing, dude? After that game, Pitt holds a players only meeting. They played better against Clemson in their next game. They still lost, but then won at Syracuse on Saturday. And so here's where this is for me. Carolina, there's got to be stuff on like Syracuse is just not, frankly, good enough to win that game against Pitt. Pitt is a solid team, but there's stuff on tape that the coaching staff has to find. And then you don't be turds, you don't be jerks, but how do you get under the Capel's skin? Frustrate them, tick them off, and let that spill over to their players. And then they just start doing uncharacteristic things and you win a basketball game. That's number 3. Get into them a little bit. Number 4. On Saturday, I said I thought the most critical player to get going to really it was a get right game. That's what I called it. Was Ian Jackson, man. So critical. He was coming off back-to-back single-digit performances. Had 18, had a great stretch in the second half. Today, in this game, it's Elliot, Cadeau, and here's why. I've often said, and in fact I did in segment 1, that Carolina has to do better with valuing every possession. There are times when Elliot does that. But there are also a couple times a game where he will be careless with the basketball. He'll try to force a pass or just not make an accurate pass. And that's not good enough. And I know he knows. I'm not saying anything Elliot or anybody else doesn't know. But there's another level for him to get to with that. I like that Elliot has been more aggressive lately, offensively, getting to the rim and doing things like that. Obviously, he's had some really strong assist games lately, but he'll sprinkle in these either negative assist to turnover ratio games or even assist to turnover ratio games like Saturday, where he had 4 of each. For Carolina to take those details and discipline next steps, Elliot's got to be the ringleader. Man, he's the point guard, and he's got to be so honed in and locked in on what that is and what that means and what that looks like that Carolina is in position to win games. Because in games where everything is such a thin razor's edge margin, as we just looked at a little bit ago, you just can't have those autopilot moments where you throw it away. There are times when it looks Kendall Marshall-esque or Ed Cota-y, but there are other times when it's like, I mean, I could throw some passes about as bad as that. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's got to get better. So Elliot, again, has been more aggressive lately. I just want to see him do so with wisdom and with intentionality while still being the athlete that he is, man. Just let it rip. Get out of your head and go. That's what we're looking for. All right. We got to get to the details of this game, get to know Pitt a little bit, our game prediction, and, of course, the answer to the Tuesday trivia question. All that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about TurboTax. You know, taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying, am I going to get any money back? And then doing more of all that, waiting, worrying, and wondering. But now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on the progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, and everything with 100% accuracy. All of that so that you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert tax now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live, full service, real-time updates are only available in the iOS mobile app, and you can see the guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, North Carolina at Pitt tonight, Tuesday, January 28th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the Peterson Event Center, 9 p.m. tip. Good news, though, it's the last 9 p.m. tip of the regular season. Thank goodness it's on ESPN. FanDuel line, again, we said it earlier, but Pitt -3.5. Ken Palm has it Pitt -3. And look, I don't know about you, but because of all the just with the Capel brothers in recent years, and in particular with our own Tar Heel, Jason Capel, behind Duke and State, this is the team I want to beat more than any maybe Alabama's starting to work their way into that mix a little bit. Good night. But Pittsburgh, I'm just done with them. So let's pummel them into the ground tonight and when we play them in a couple Saturdays. All right, Good. Thank you. Glad we're agreed on that. Series record 17-8 in favor of the Tar Heels. It's been a weird series. Carolina had a 6-game winning streak from 16 to 19, 2016 to 2019. Pitt then won 5 of 6 from 2020 to 2023. 3 of those wins were at the Dean Smith Center, for crying out loud. But then Carolina won both meetings last year, a regular season game at Pitt, and then in the ACC tournament semifinals. Pitt had a first half lead. Carolina came back and won. Head coach Jeff Capel, this is his 7th year at Pitt. That's pretty crazy. They're not ranked in the AP poll right now. They were picked 7th in the ACC preseason. As of Monday, they were 34th in the net. For reference, Carolina was 40th. So this is a quad 1 game. On the road, it's like top 75 are all quad 1. So that's very safe. Pitt is also 34th at KenPom. For reference, Carolina 38th. They are 19th in offensive efficiency. That's better than Carolina, but 71st in defensive efficiency. That's worse than Carolina. So far this season, Pitt is 13-6, 4-4 in ACC play. Again, as I said, they just won at Syracuse on Saturday, but prior to that, they had lost at Duke versus Louisville, at Florida State, and versus Clemson in overtime, but a 4-game losing skid. Now, to be fair, 3 of those 4 are what appear to be the top 3 teams in the league right now, Duke, Louisville, and Clemson. So, there is that. But outside of that, their wins are just kind of ho-hum as well. At Virginia Tech versus Cal versus Stanford, and at Syracuse. And I know it's like, hey, we didn't beat Stanford. Yeah, I know, I hear that. But still, it's like, you kind of won the games you should win, and you've kind of lost the games you should lose. Carolina has mostly done the same. So it's a toss-up game in a lot of ways. Best non-con wins, they beat West Virginia. That game looks better every day. They beat LSU, and they won at true road game at Ohio State in overtime. Their non-con losses were to Wisconsin and Mississippi State. Both understandable, both really strong teams. Players to watch. Let's get to know who these Panthers are. Thankfully, Bub Carrington is gone after his freshman year. That dude was so tough to deal with. And Blake Hinson also gone. But Bub Carrington's classmate from last year, Jalen Lowe, is still around, and this dude is a load to deal with. Pittsburgh, like Carolina, has continued to tinker with their starting lineup, but their most common one, and the one they've used in 5 of the last 6 games, is this. Zach Austin, 6'7", forward. He's a senior, 9.5 points a game, shooting 40% from 3 on 4.4 attempts. Cam Corrin is a 6'10" forward. He's a junior. This is his first year at Pitt, coming over from Florida State. He's third leading scorer, 10.7 points, 5.8 rebounds, shooting really high percentage from 2. One of the guys you'll certainly remember, there's the 2 twins, the Diaz-Graham brothers. One of them plays a lot, the other that doesn't. Guillermo is the one that does play a lot. 7-foot forward, 6.2 points, 5.3 rebounds. Not all that impressive for what you would expect from him. And interestingly, he takes more threes than he does 2s on the season. So we'll see with that. But then the dudes. The 2 dudes are their backcourt players. Ish Leggett, he's a 6'3" senior guard. He's a Rhode Island transfer, but this is his second year at Pitt. 16.5 points a game, 5.6 boards, 2.8 assists, 1.7 steals, shooting 35.5% from 3. So really, really got to take care of Leggett. That's probably, well, I'll say this in a second. And then also Jalen Lowe, who we just mentioned, 6'3" guard, 17.7 points a game, 4.3 rebounds, 5.7 assists, does have 3 turnovers a game, and you want to make Jalen Lowe a shooter, 26.8% from 3, and he takes 5 attempts a game. So sag off of him, make him beat you from deep. If he does, you tip your hat and say, oh, well, we tried, right? But you would rather have that than him beating you off the dribble. Again, maybe that zone could do wonders. We'll see what happens with defensive assignments with all this, because it's going to be crazy. In terms of depth, Damian Dunn is the highest scoring guy off the bench. He's a Houston transfer, 9.9 points a game. He's a 6'5" guard. My prediction for this thing, look, I know Pitt is favored at FanDuel. I know they're at home. I just think they run too hot and cold, and they're a little bit crazy because of the whole Capel of it all. So give me the Tar Heels winning this game on the road. A little bit of a like, is this a turning point? I see that happening tonight. I don't know why. I just feel it coming off of what happened Saturday. Give me Carolina 77-73. All right. Tuesday trivia answer coming right at you. After Elliot Cadeau's 13 assists recently, I thought, oh man, let me give a trivia for the top 4 single game assist totals in Carolina history. And really, I'm just asking you for who they are. Who are those 4 players? I'll go top down. You ready? 18 assists is the single game Carolina record. That's Raymond Felton versus George Mason on December 7th of 2003. 2 guys tied for second. One is Ed Cota, as you would probably guess. That's against UNLV back in 1999. And the other, current assistant coach Jeff Lebo against UTC, University of Tennessee Chattanooga, back in 1988. And then in 4th place on this list, but who did it this exact number 3 times, 16 assists, none other than Kendall Marshall. 3 times he had 16 assists in the game. At Maryland in 2012 versus Long Beach State in 2011 and versus Florida State also in 2011. If you had quizzed me, I think I would have guessed Kendall Marshall had the highest total of any Tar Heel, but I would have been wrong. It was Ray Felton and then Cota and Lebo as well. And so Kendall Marshall is single game wise in 4th place on this list, but he filled it up with 16 3 different times. Can Elliot Cadeau work his way onto this? We'll find out. He's got a shot, but he needs dudes to hit buckets, and he needs to complete those passes. All right, guys, get a nap in. It's going to be a late one. Here's how we're going to handle it. I loved what we did last week, and I want to do that again. After the game tonight, we will go live, have our live post game, but then for Wednesday's show, I'm actually going to do that live on Wednesday morning. I just thought that'd be a fun way to break it up, and it's always fun to have that live energy both right after the game and the next morning as you continue to unpack it. So that's how we're going to handle that. And then lots of great stuff coming up later in the week as well. If you haven't subscribed to the show on video and audio, make sure you do that right now so you don't miss a second of Locked On Tar Heels. Help us get to 10-3, 10,000 YouTube subscribers in 3 years. We're working our way there, and it's so close. Got to hit it by the end of February. So if you haven't subscribed, do it right now. Join us on the Locked On Tar Heels Discord. Links in the show notes, free to join. And if you want to go deeper, join the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders program. That link is also in the show notes. Y'all, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk tonight after the game. Have a great Tuesday, but until then, peace.